Morning.
Morning.
Hi, Cody.
Hi, Al.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
All right. So, are you ready to? I know you got your boxing gloves on today. Are you going to smack him around?
No, I don't think so. I think this episode is going to be more about information than it is arguing. I think maybe we'll find out.
All right. So, what are you guys up to today?
Well, you know, the election's coming up in November. And we just had the primaries. Now you got 90 days till the election popping up. And we decided we're going to let you know who's running and tell you a little about their platforms that they've been posting everywhere publicly. So give you a little insight on who your candidate is and who you could be voting for.
What's that got to do with treason?
It's educating everyone on the ballot.
Do you really want to go there, Al?
Guys, have a good show.
Thanks. Well, good morning, Franklin County, and welcome to the next edition of Liberty is Treason. I'm Cody Booker, and this is my host, Ricky Tips. And as Ricky said earlier, we want to talk about elections today, but before we do, I'd like to say a little bit of something that actually pulls at my heartstrings a little bit. So, like most of you, I grew up extremely patriotic. I believed in American freedom, I believed in our system, and I believed in our election process. But this last primary election cycle was the first election cycle in my adult lifetime that I did not vote federally at all. And I don't think I ever will again. And that kind of goes back to when Alan just asked me what elections have to do with liberty is treason. I believe it's what's happened in our election system is treasonous. And I think that there's a lot of people responsible, and we could dive down that pretty far. But you know, like I said, I grew up, you know, with a strong sense of civic duty and a strong sense of civic responsibility. Joined the Army at 18. You know, I did my time in the Army. I voted every election because I felt like that was the only way that I would ever have a voice that I could ever make change. But over my adult life, and I'm 46 years old. I'm old to some of you and young to others. But for years, I've strongly suspected that the elections mattered less and less every election cycle. It seemed to me that either my views on liberty in this country and freedom and government are extremely unique, or that my legislators just didn't care and to do what's actually best for the people or what's actually best for the liberty of this country. It seemed like they were either representing a corporate interest or themselves. So, you know, for a long time, I guess I felt like a weirdo. I felt like, you know, well, maybe the Conservative Party isn't for me. The Liberal Party certainly isn't for me. The Democrats isn't for me. So who's for me? And that's when I searched out and I found the Libertarians, who mostly seemed to agree the same things I did. You know, small, limited government. You know, a lot of civic participation in government. And I found out that I wasn't as unique as I thought I was. And the more and more people that I speak to about liberty and about what's happening in this country, the more I find that they're in agreement with me. And I really think that I may be on that side of those political polls you see that says, you know, 20% Democrat, you know, 35% Republican, and the rest are independents. And I really think I'm with that crowd. So in a lot of ways, I really feel that I may be in the majority. But, you know, being the guy that I am, I don't like to dive into anything, you know, completely ignorant. So, and Ricky can tell you, I mean, usually I try to be objective in arguments. I try to see the other side. I try to do my research and do my due diligence. And when I did, what I found was a lot of information that surprised me. I found a Princeton University study that measured how public opinion influences the laws that Congress does or does not pass. And in the study, they looked at 1,800 public opinion polls over a 20-year period. And what the data showed is actually kind of astonishing, and I wonder if the public knows this. So when researchers compared public support for a law against the likelihood of it becoming a law, what they found was that regardless of whether a law had 100% public support, and I mean 100%, if everybody wanted it, if it was the most popular law ever designed by a legislator in the history of mankind, or it had 0% and nobody wanted it, the law had exactly a 30% chance of passing. Now, wrap your mind around that, no matter what the public support was. So no matter of how much public support a law has, the law still has a 30% chance of passing. So really, if you think about it, and I think Ricky has a mathematics degree of some sort, he can back me up on this, that really, that makes it significantly insignificant whether the public does or does not support a law. So we ask ourselves, why is it? So, you know, we can dive down this rabbit hole, we can go for a long time. But I mean, it's a lot of different things, from the fact that, just like our last show, we pointed out that our political system is now a duopoly. You know, it's two parties that run it all. They do everything they can do, create laws and everything else to keep any independent or any other voice out. Gerrymandering, where they're allowed to redraw their own districts, literally. So you know, it's public knowledge who voted where or where a person lives and how they voted. So literally, as soon as it starts to not go their way, a GOP or a Democrat legislature will redraw its districts to literally, in the craziest, weirdest little shapes, to literally grab one voter, two voter, three voters, and make a difference in this campaign. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. And the other one is campaign finance. And we'll talk a little bit about that today with soon-to-be senator, I have a feeling, Haggerty, who, at the end of the day, once he becomes a legislator, regardless of what he says he wants to do, the fact is he's going to have to spend 75% of his time raising money to keep that office. Because the fact is, it takes a congressman, a senator in any state, about $45,000 a day they have to raise for 365 days a year to keep that seat. And when you consider that only 0.05% of all people in the United States even donate to politics, are we surprised that they don't represent us? Who do they represent? Who are those 0.05%? Well, they're the wealthy, and they're the corporations, or the special interest groups that support the corporations or lobby for the corporations. Add that to the fact that, you know, the duopoly's influence on the election and ballot access and limiting who cannot run and enforcing the narrative on different media sites of, you know, left versus right, and that you know, you have to vote for one or the other or you're wasting your vote. Consider the fact that upwards of 80% of all seats go unopposed. Nobody even runs. So, I mean, yeah, it's literally like giving them the game. We're literally forfeiting before the game even starts. I mean, even in our own district, here, District 39, Iris Rudder will go unopposed. Every single Franklin County School Board member ran unopposed. So if any of you have a strong opinion or don't think that the Franklin County School Board is going the right direction or don't think that legislature is going the right direction, run. Oh, but you won't. And why won't you? Because you're an automatic loser. And why? Because the duopoly has control of it all. And yeah, I know what they say. Tell us how you really feel. And that's pretty much how I really feel. At least with federal elections. I believe that local elections and state elections can make a difference. And even as libertarian as I am, and you know, this is not sycophantic talk, but it's the truth. I've watched Rudder and I've watched Bowling. And for the most part, especially Janice. Janice is a good legislator. She really is. She does what's right for our community, and I believe that Rudder does or wants to, but I know more about Janice than I do about Iris. But almost everything Janice runs for or seems to promote seems to be about the same way I would vote. It's the same thing I would push, except the whole internet thing. But as we're proving with COVID, maybe I was wrong on that, because now it seems to be almost a necessity. You know, we'd be a lot better shape with this COVID thing if everybody had a high-speed internet everywhere, and then they could go to school online.
Because that actually is one of the biggest issues with online schooling in rural America.
I agree.
Because there's no internet access.
And I mean, maybe Janice was right. I mean, as far as a public need, you know, I've moved, you know, off my anarchist roots more to a minarchist roots, and agree that, you know, some local government especially is needed. And I've experienced some things, especially in the juvenile court system, that I believe that some people may need guidance above and beyond just what the civic community can offer.
All right, so getting into that, we already mentioned Iris Rudder running unopposed in this election, but we do have a couple of federal elections. We have one state, Janice Bowling is running against Young Love,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Young Love, and
which is surprising, really, how terrible that campaign is being run, because I didn't even know her name until today.
yeah, it's. I remember seeing a couple signs, but not enough. You made the comment that it's a seat holder.
It's either a seat holder or a name recognition thing. So that's one of the political tricks that people play, is they will actually run for an office they don't want or have any designs or know that they can't win, but they do so just so that they can start raising money, you know, on the federal level, what do they call it? They call it exploratory committees. Mm-hmm. But for small local elections, your exploratory committee is really, you know, taking $1,000 of your own money, going to a sign company like Signorama, get some signs made that you're running for something, throw them out everywhere, go get your signatures, run for something, and then see what the public feedback is. If it's horrible, a lot of those people pull out immediately. You'll see those signs vanish a week later. Or if it's okay or fair to middling, they do it for name recognition for the next election or the next election, or maybe for a bigger seat. Maybe this Young Love lady has no real designs on taking Janice's seat. Maybe she has designs on another seat.
You know, you're right with it, the fact that you just don't know who she is. And we printed out a little information on her, and I guess it came from her website talking about her platform. And I know you scanned over it real quick this morning. I didn't have an opportunity to after we found it. But tell us a little what she says and what she thinks.
Well, at a glance, I'll dive into the specifics in a second, but at a glance, I see the same thing I see with most of the demagogue and the demagogue type, the pandering populist, that just want to say whatever their electorate wants to hear. I see a lot of that junk in here. I see stuff that she claims, like increasing job opportunities in tourism, helping our families, but they never dive into how they're going to do that, how they're going to convince, how they're going to write the bill, who are they going to write the bill with, because a bill is a law, because that's all legislators do is pass laws. So who are they going to write it with, what's it going to say, how are they going to convince the people across the aisle to vote for it too, or how are they going to run around legislature and convince people to vote for their bill. Typical political mumbo jumbo, and I don't want to seem like too much of a GOP fanboy here, because I'm really not. But like I said before, Miss Bowling is a pretty good legislator, and that's one of the things I see here. She's this young lady is attacking Miss Bowling on protecting our jobs. And what she says here is, earlier this year, Mrs. Bowling co-sponsored a bill which purported to be a jobs creation bill. Under that bill, there would no longer be required licensure for certain professions. After an outpouring of protest by the affected professions, the bill was placed into subcommittee, and Mrs. Bowling proclaimed it was killed. While placing the bill into subcommittee puts it on hold for now, it can be resurrected to make its way back through the House Senate for a vote. Ms. Younglove goes on to say that I'm adamantly opposed to this bill and will vigorously fight to keep the licensure requirements, blah, 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 blah. Well, first of all, that's a non-issue, because Ms. Bowling is right. And if Ms. Younglove had done her homework, or even maybe ever been to legislative committee, she would knew what happened to that bill, and it went to summer study. And in legislature, when something goes to summer study, it's known as the desk where things go to die. That bill is dead and gone. But my opinion on this is Mrs. Bowling was correct and Mrs. Younglove is not. So what happens when states require licensures for a lot of professions is they create a cartel. And a cartel is basically a monopoly. So, like Jefferson said government was never intended to be a player. Jefferson said that it was intended to be a referee. It was intended to make the playing field fair. Well, how is it fair that the government can tell Ricky whether he can charge me $10 to cut my hair, and require, honestly, more schooling and a more expensive school than it takes to be an EMT or a medic? And that's a fact. To cut someone's hair, you have to go to a school that's more expensive and longer than you do to be an EMT, an emergency responder. Why does the government have that right? People have gotten confused over what a right is. And government is supposed to be there to protect our rights. If anything, somebody like Miss Bowling is going to legislate to protect our rights, because she's trying to remove that law, exactly what I've demanded of our legislators. Well, another reason I like Janice is because she actually looks at laws and tries to remove dumb ones, and that's a dumb one. Now, for some things, not all things. Should a doctor be licensed by a greater organization? Yes. Should it be government? Maybe. It seems like Harvard Medical can handle it. Vanderbilt Medical can handle it. They know who they're putting out into the system. It seems to be working. So why is even a state board required for that? Why does government even involved in that? So I'm going to disagree with Ms. Younglove on that, and I don't know that the outpouring was strong. If the outpouring was strong, I would have to think that it was only because of those licensing organizations and those people who are already part of the cartel, where they have those, demanded it not be, because they had to go through it. The next thing, Ms. Younglove.
I believe the EMTs need to be also, but that's a profession that should be licensed.
But my point was, should it have to be licensed by state, by government? Why is it government?
I think there should be an oversight. I don't know if it has to be state, but there should be an oversight committee, someone that goes in to make sure, because so many things change.
Well, I agree. Accreditation.
That aspect, yeah. Well, no, I'm saying there's so many things that change from year to year in protocol. There's so many medical things that change over the span from year to year, that I think that there should be some oversight. And it doesn't have to be government oversight, but there should be an oversight committee. Government seems like that's what they do, what they're here anyways for. I know it's not, but that's what they turned into. But it needs to be someone that oversights these, because I would like to know that if I have an accident and someone's coming there to take care of me, that they are up to date and properly trained on the latest and the newest procedures on how to do something, how to take care of someone. If you look at, you took the combat medic course, I guarantee, when you were in the military, way back when. I guarantee you the course I taught when I was in the military on combat life-saving was totally different than the one you took.
Sure, because things advance, things change. We got new toys.
So I think that they should be, there's certain professions I think should be annually have to go through and have to, maybe a refresher course.
And I think they already do, and I think you bring up a really great point that honestly you should probably talk to your legislator about, and that's, like I said, in the spirit of Jefferson and making the playing field equal and the government being the referee. What government's real job in most cases is to find all the players that are affected, sit them down at the table and get them to hash it out. So absent a national database or even a state private database where those licenses could be made. Accreditations, you know what I mean? Just like my bachelor's degree, your bachelor's degree was all accredited by somebody. Mine was Northwestern, yours was whoever, does wherever you went to school. But the same thing, so what government should do, somebody like Janice or maybe one of our senators, is sit down with all those private players who do have an interest in that and try to get them to create their own private accreditation organization, which is either statewide or nationwide, where they do that. They have conferences and whatnot, they get together, they see what's new in the field, they see what's working, they require a class, and it can be private rather than done by government. And I think that really applies to across the board in government when government requires licenses for most things. It's either to gain revenue through the licensing process or to control what's being allowed or done with the licenses, and I really think that's better served probably by a public entity. But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I just don't like the fact the government does it. I don't think it's public money they should be doing it.
Well, as long as if the organization or the group is funded by the license themselves, then I don't look at it as being public money. It's private money paying for that entity.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
Yeah.
And I mean, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think that the only required one should, and again, when you say required, what you're asking for is law, and when you're asking for law, you're asking for violence in some way, but the ones that should maybe be required by law, or at least required by law to have a greater accreditation from a private entity, should be how the law reads, rather than that the government is the entity that gets it. Because I think we can all agree that for the most part, government a lot of times drops the ball on a lot of these things, whether it be OSHA, TOSHA, whatever accreditation.
The hair salon situation, I also agree with that. That's something that I don't understand why there has to be. And I know people have worked really hard in this profession to get their license and be able to do it. But that's an industry that, if you have a dirty salon or you do a bad job, people aren't coming to see you.
Well, sure, and I really think that'll take care of itself.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and if there's a private organization, for instance, let's just invent one. Let's say the Barbers Association of Tennessee, and this is a private entity. So if you have that Barbers Association of Tennessee stamp on your window that agrees that you follow certain procedures of safety, health, and whatnot, but based on that private institution that you pay regularly to come check you. Now, if the barber store next door doesn't have that accreditation, and you walk in and they're, filthy, well, maybe that's what you start looking for in your mind. And for a long time in the 50s and 60s in this country, that's how quality organizations came to be, from the Better Business Bureau to a lot of them. They were private entities that you paid into, agreed to follow their rules. And when you do, that gives the consumer a certain satisfaction of knowing that, you're part of the Barbers Association of Tennessee and agreed to stay clean.
All right, so what else we got on Young Love?
Ms. Younglove says that she'd like to increase job opportunities in tourism. I love it when government says they're going to increase jobs. That's hilarious. Being a senator should not be a resume builder. Being a senator binds us to our districts and doing what's best for all. There are very gifted groups and individuals in our district who have great ideas. I need your input on how to best utilize the resources for job building and tourism. Well, so what did this just say from Ms. Younglove? It basically just said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I would like the public to give me ideas, and then we're going to do something. Well, you'd think that if there was a problem, rather than it just be a dialectic, if there was a problem, she would have posed what the problem was first, that we're lacking in job opportunities in tourism, or some numbers, but she didn't. She's just pandering to what she thinks people want to hear. This whole thing really feels like she sat down with either a 6th grader or 7th grader and just copied and pasted some stuff off the internet from other political sites and didn't actually think through anything she was about to say. And right now, of course, she could argue that any politician could argue tourism and job opportunities is kind of in limbo due to all this COVID stuff. We're kind of,
When a multi-billion-dollar a day industry like Disney gets put on hold,
right.
Tourism is definitely taking a hit this year.
And they chose to, right?
Yeah.
There was no edict in Florida at that time. Walt
No.
Disney World chose to. I mean, can you imagine the optics if, 10,000 people went to Disney World one day and, 5,000 of them left with COVID and another 1,000 died? That wouldn't be good for the Mickey Mouse, I don't think.
Probably not.
She goes on to say she wants to help our families. I'd like to help our families too, and I hope she's about to say, I haven't read it yet, but I hope, all I've read is the headline, helping our families, but I hope what she's about to say is about releasing their tax burden and getting rid of some laws and giving them back some of their own money and letting them decide how to spend their own money. But I have a feeling, being a Democrat, that's not what she's about to say. So let's find out. I'm not wealthy. I've worked my entire adult life and I've raised 2 children. I admire and respect stay-at-home moms and dads, but for so many of us, it just isn't feasible. Many people in our district work hard just to pay the essentials, and even then, it's tough financially. It usually takes 2 incomes just to make ends meet. Let's put our heads together and come up with workable solutions and pay an actual living wage. So what she really said there is she wants to raise the minimum wage. So what she really said there is she wants to force the government, through the force of violence, is how the government operates, to tell a man what he can or cannot make as a wage. I've never believed in the minimum wage at all. If you think about it, by denying a man the legal right to make what he asks for a living, you're forcing him to be either on the welfare rolls or broke.
I have a strong opinion on minimum wage, and Chris sitting here across from us, we've had this conversation. The minimum wage is a starting point. It's not a point for anyone to survive on, to live on, to prosper throughout their life. But the minimum wage is a starting point. For me, the minimum wage is that's how we start you off. And we make sure you are able to do what you can do. No one should ever try to live off of minimum wage. You always try to aspire to work your way up to earn more money. If you can provide a service that is, needed, and you do a better job than what I expect when we hired you, you get a pay bump. You're going to make more money. Minimum wage is a starting point. It's the place where businesses start someone to find out what they actually can do, and then once they do that and you have the conversation with the individual, usually that pay gets raised. I don't know anyone, and I've worked many jobs where I started at minimum wage and I've never stayed at minimum wage long, but minimum wage is the starting point on that. If you tell any small business that they're going to have to pay $15 an hour for minimum wage, I'm telling you, the majority of them are going to, 1, have to raise prices on everything in their business to pay for those employees at minimum wage. And 2, I would promise you about 35% of them will shut their doors because they can't afford to.
Yeah, if you force them to. And that's how government can cartelize an industry. And actually, if you look at the end result of it, they can force the wages down by artificially keeping, the standard at a certain level. And my question is more of an ideal question. Ideally, we've asked ourselves for a long time what's wrong with this country, and the fact that we're the dreamers, we're the innovators, we're the people who want to fight and struggle and get to the top. And I really think in a lot of ways, minimum wage kills that. It kills the idea of the dream, because I know what you just said, and you're right, that nobody should want to live off, what is minimum wage? $7.25, $7.50, something like that. So $7.25. Nobody should want to live off that. That shouldn't be want to be your adult wage. But the fact is, Ricky, a lot do. A lot do. And a lot are okay with making $7.25, okay with making $8, and never aspire to be anything better, or to do anything better, or to work harder. And I really think that's part of what's killing the dream, because they make it, the government gives you just enough through social systems and through minimum wage, just enough to barely eke by in life. And a lot of people are content with that. But I think absent that, just like absent this, we can go to the same thing with this extra $400 that Trump wants everybody to have, or the extra $600. It really has killed the American dream in a lot of ways. It really does need to go away. And I was unemployed, and I did benefit from that for a short period. No longer do. But at the end of the day, people should want to rise back up and get rid of that. But when you artificially inflate the economy, most people don't. Most people just look at it as a vacation, and a couple of months off, and they can still pay their bills, when that's not really what's going to get this country back up on its feet. The same with minimum wage. I think the minimum wage should be abolished altogether, and then people should dream to want to do something different. You and I, you said, you and I, we are not of that demographic where we'd ever be happy with $7.50. We're, for whatever reason, and most people aren't. I don't think they want to rise up and they want to learn, but a lot of people don't.
But you look at Seattle, raise the minimum wage. and they went to $12 an hour, I think. It crippled businesses in Seattle.
And that's a good thing, because that's one of the reasons we're a republic. You know, I love the fact that we're a republic where we can try little things on the micro level, and you know, we don't have to try it on the macro level. So, you know, the pundits came out and they said, hey, you know, if you do this, Seattle, here's what's going to happen. The inflation's going to go through the roof. You're not going to have an employee workforce. It's going to raise the price of cost of living, blah, 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 blah. And sure enough, all that came to be true. Well, good. Maybe now they'll figure out they screwed up and retract all that.
So that's the issue there. All right, now, Young Glove running against Janice Mullen. Janice is an individual that has, in my opinion, done a very, very good job in her seat. I've been very impressed with what she does. I've always thought highly of her. And you know, I know you've had some good interactions with her as well.
And the funny thing about that is I actually ran the campaign of the person who opposed her the first time she took the seat. And we, Janice and I didn't start out great friends. And then she actually, when I was lobbying legislature 3 or 4 years ago, I spoke to her quite a few times, and she backed our bills for the most part, because they're liberty bills. But I was proven wrong with Janice, and I've told Janice that. I've told her that I was proven wrong. She's actually been a really good legislator, and we could have done a lot worse.
No, she is definitely one of the few that I feel takes her job seriously and really looks after the individuals that are her district.
Except she was 30 minutes late to our meeting when I lobbied her like 3 years ago, so there's that.
I mean, I'd believe you all too. You did run a campaign against her. As 30's all it was.
I did. Well, kind of, sort of. It's a long story. I'm not going to go into that. But that was before I was really into politics.
But Janice's platform, you know, well, we don't have the information brought out in front of us for her platform, but I can tell you a lot about Janice's. You know, like you said, she has championed several bills to help out our area. I am in complete support of the trying to get broadband internet to all the rural communities. I think that's a must. It has to be done. I don't know if it needs to be done through TVA, which is what they're talking now, or if it has to go through, you know, however you're going to plan on doing this. But I think it needs to be a must that rural Tennessee has broadband access.
Well, I agree. I do now agree. I may not agree with the means. I don't. And here's the problem. The problem is if the government takes over a utility, what happens to the private utilities that already run those? What happens to your Comcast, to your Cablevisions, to your AT&T versus to those guys if government takes over the utility? So rather than cartelize it, again, I'm going to use that word, rather than have government cartelize it and create a monopoly, a government monopoly, what they should do is incentivize it. So, you know, you go into AT&T and you say, for instance, you say, AT&T, could you, you know, wire up these rural areas that are near one of your, you know, your nodes, whatever. And AT&T says, no, you know, that's just not profitable for us. So government should say, well, what would make it profitable for you? And they say, well, if we got another, you know, $30,000 for these 2 neighborhoods, you know, and instead of the government's taking our money, stealing our money in taxes and giving that money to them, don't do it that way. Do it by what's incentivizing, tax incentives. So make you pay. If you agree to put internet here, that should offset the cost, and then boom, you know, private industry is able to stay, the government doesn't cartelize it or take over it, and people get internet service. That's how it should work with literally everything in government.
Well, I have no problem with that. Completely no problem with that. I just want it done. And that's the aspect of it is, I don't see them saying we're going to cut your taxes, even though I know they do for many industries. I just don't foresee that being a thing when the government can look at this as a way for us to make revenue.
So I mean, if you look, yeah, I mean, that's flawed thinking. That's flawed
Completely
thinking.
flawed, but it's the truth.
Well, yeah, and as I've already established, even if 100% of us support them, you know, incentivizing them, it's still only a 30% chance of them passing it. So
TVA is a federal government organization. TVA provides the power for all of, 6 states? You know, it's not just this Tennessee Valley Authority, but they cover North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. I want to say they even go into Arkansas.
sure.
So it's not just South Carolina also. It's not just Tennessee that it covers, but the TVA provides power for all these areas, and they get money off of it.
Sure.
You know, every power company pays TVA a fee to get their, you know, get the power that they send out to you. That's why your power bill fluctuates because.
Yeah, but all the power companies are government.
I understand that, but it's still the way this is. It's a way for the government to make money outside of taxing us.
Sure, and do you know when the TVA was first proposed and launched, way back in the day, what about Roosevelt?
Yeah, it was one of the projects they did to stop the Great Depression.
Yeah, but they basically said that eventually down the line, it was actually in the original language, that down the line they were going to sell it off to private industry and let private industry take over, because there was a huge concern at that time from the civil libertarians that it was a government takeover in an industry that private could, but wasn't, satisfying. And they've actually tried that over the years several times, and for some reason it meets great public opposition, the idea that the TVA be sold to a private industry, to a private energy company to run, which I don't really understand. It seems anti-American to me to demand the government control any business, but it is what it is.
Because I don't care how they get the internet out there, in all honesty at this point, because I just think it's one of those things that needs to be done, especially in the climate we're in right now with the COVID and everything, that situation where these kids, there's a good chance, Coffee County's already looking at going straight virtual learning. There's a couple other school districts that are looking at doing virtual learning only. And if Franklin County gets, I think we're at 140 active cases right now of COVID, when it gets to 220 active cases, then the school has to start looking, they have to change the way they're doing, letting kids in.
I get it. I see the need, and I understand the need, and it's really unfortunate that COVID has expedited the need like it has, because I really think that private industry was about to have this one licked. And the fact that there's been several companies now launching multiple satellites whose goal and aim is to give the world broadband. And believe it or not, America, if you don't know this, there's thousands of satellites going up all the time that have this goal in mind. And here's my big fear. If Janice did get her way and you make it a TVA public utility, what happens a lot of times when government cartelizes an industry is they hold technology back. Because rather than now say, okay, say the state of Tennessee, has to pay TVA, or the TVA is a federal entity, so wherever the money comes from, TVA puts out all this money to dig new lines, to put new lines up, all this fiber and all this tech, and then in 5 years, it either goes away and government has to agree that it wasted the money, and that they only got 5 years use out of it, or they start creating laws against competition, which has happened a lot of times in a lot of different industries that governments get into. The environment, the coal industry, that's a prime example. So what happens when they invest all these billions of dollars into giving everybody internet, and then in 5 years, say, Elon Musk or somebody who is one of the guys working on it has, their grid in the sky and giving everybody free broadband, it just goes away and the taxpayer just lost all that money?
That's a valid point. It really is.
And that's really why I think they should work with the people who are already working on this. Government should, by reducing their taxes, giving them an incentive to, if I'm sure Elon Musk would love, the federal government to take, another $30 million off whatever taxes he owes.
All right. And the other race that we're looking at in November is going to be for District 4's. You got Scott Desjardins. Yeah. Scott Desjardins running against Christopher Hale. Desjardins, the incumbent, been in there for a decade now.
Yeah, he seems to be well liked, and he seems to be bulletproof no matter what seems to happen with him or his campaign. You handed me something earlier, and I'm going to try to go off memory because I don't remember where it is.
It's right here. I can bring it up.
Oh, it was on your phone.
Yeah, that's where he sent it to me last night.
And here's one of the problems I have with conservative. So ask yourself what conservative means. Conservative means that you want to keep things the same for the most part. But the conservative, moniker has become, the fiscal responsibility, spend less money. So I'd like to read. Is it okay to read this? Yeah. This is a text actually written by Scott Desjardins to Ricky here at the radio station. And in the text, Mr. Desjardins says, with a divided government, I've been proud to support the president and deliver prior to COVID-19 one of the best economic growth, low unemployment periods of the history of this country. Now I'm working with the president to combat COVID-19 and reopen America to get our economy restarted. Honorable. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I worked to see that the military received the largest pay raise in a decade, refocused our military strategy on the America First agenda, and supported Tennessee's men and women in uniform and their families, including our mission at Arnold Air Force Base. I've also supported the largest increases in veterans spending as well. While doing these things, I continue to be recognized by one of the most conservative members of Congress. And I enjoy an A rating from groups such as the National Rifle Association, the Heritage Foundation, the American Conservatives Union, Citizens Against Government Waste, National Taxpayers Union, Federation for Immigration Reform, and Numbers USA. I'm also recognized by the American and Tennessee Farm Bureaus as a friend of farmers for my work in the House Agricultural Committee. And here, again, is one of the big problems I have with conservatives. He literally says, I have supported the largest increases in veteran spending. While doing these things, I continue to be recognized as one of the most conservative members of Congress. So ask yourself, what is it that conservative means again? What is fiscal responsibility? And okay, we can toss that aside. We can say, okay, I want to support our troops too. I long since thought that troopers needed, soldiers and troops needed a pay raise. They don't get paid squat for what they do. But what a good conservative should have said is, and I found the money here by getting rid of this program, getting rid of this law, getting rid of this program. And if we do these things, we'll have plenty of money to give our veterans support, our soldiers support, and not raise your taxes. That's what more politicians need to do. I said it last show and I'll say it again. We need legislators who go up there, like Janice did with the licensure thing, and look for laws to get rid of. Look for ways to find money by reducing how much money. We can't just keep earning more and more and more and giving them more and more and more. I mean, we're already in a state of affairs to where most Americans give upwards to 50% and a lot of them more of their total income, of every bit of the sweat of their labor, to the government to run programs that are inefficient. That is wrong. I mean, we had a revolutionary world with the fact that there was a 3% stamp tax, and we're okay with having 50% of our income just taken by the force of law, by the force of violence. More legislators need to take laws away. So what Scott should have said, and I'm not necessarily opposed to Scott entirely, some things, I mean, I think we said about 50-50 on issues. But what Scott should start saying is, and I found the money here. How are you going to do this? Same thing we talked about earlier, Ricky, with all these things that demagogues say, the populists say. They say all these things they're going to do, but then how are you going to do it? Is it going to work? Are you going to be able to get it across the aisle? Are you going to be able to bring people together? We need more leaders who can stand up and speak, who can stand up and get people behind them to do the right things.
Now, the things I look for being that we have, I don't want to say total opposites when we look at politicians, because a lot of things you and I, we have the same opinion on, I believe, for the most part. We might say it differently and go about it differently of what we're doing, but we usually, I think, are on the same page. What I look for when I look for a politician, look for somebody I'm going to vote for, one, I want to see what their voting history is. If they've been in office already, how have they voted on these issues, things that I care about. The second part is when someone runs, and the first time they've ran, this is what they swear they're going to run for. This is what they're going to do and how they feel things are going to happen. I don't necessarily care about the why at that point, because I don't think they even know how, because I don't think they even know how. I don't think they know what to cut or how to make it happen. I know this is what they feel passionate about. When their second term comes up, I want to see what they actually did to make those things happen. What did they put into place if that person does get elected? So with Scott, I've heard people say that he's unapproachable. It's hard to get a hold of him. I've never had a problem getting a hold of Scott.
I haven't either.
Ever.
I've interviewed him 2 or 3 times in town halls. And
I've never had a problem. If I give him a call and he didn't answer, I usually give a call back a couple hours or a text message back saying, hey, I can't talk right now, and I'm in a committee meeting.
I mean, I have gotten some less than adequate responses, but
You might not appreciate the response, but
right.
You've gotten a response.
But then that's okay. We can disagree, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to agree with everybody all the time. But that's the one thing I can say is when everyone tells me that politicians are hard to get a hold of and hard to talk to, I've never had that issue. Now, granted, I am a member of the media, and most of them, I have a lot of their personal contacts, so I'm able to get a hold of them that way. But I've even gone through the proper channel, like the way everyone else does, going through his office here with some of my VA problems. And instead of calling him directly, I've gone to his congressional office here in Franklin County and talked to the assistant lady there and got everything going that way. And saw great results. So for Scott, will say that, and I'll say that as a veteran, he's done a great job helping me with the problems I've had.
Well, that's all of them, and you know as well as I do, because you learned those tricks in the Army the same way I did. If you want something to really happen,
Yeah.
what'd they say? Write your congressman.
Yep.
How many drill sergeants looked you in the eye and said, "You don't like the way I'm screaming at you? Write your congressman." But ends up, that's the truth of it. I wrote my congressman twice when I was in the Army, and sure enough, you get an instant response all the way up the chain. And that's, of course, because no legislator wants to be seen as anti-veteran or not helping the veterans, and that's an easy way they can help your veterans. It's when the veterans have a problem. I mean, all they can do is send a letter and at least get the ball rolling.
Oh, yeah.
And I found that with all of them. It wasn't this day, Charlie. I don't even remember who it was I was writing letters to back then. It was like 92, 93. But I got responses, and I hear what you're saying with Scott. But as far as what Scott stood for or stands for, do you feel like he represents? Well, I'm not, and not even you, but what he said he would represent.
I believe he does. That's the thing with Scott. I think everything I've heard him talk about and discuss, the Farm Act, trying to help the farmers in Franklin County, he's done a great job with that. I know he's caught a lot of flack over this, the red gun law, the red law?
Red flag law.
Red flag law. I know he's caught a lot of flack over that, but I honestly don't have a problem with that. Like, I know people are going to crucify me for saying that, but I don't have a problem with that law. If someone does have, to an extent, there's parts of that law I have issues
You
with.
saw the red in my eyes, that's why you said that.
But, well, I mean, I'm not entirely opposed to the idea. I don't know if that's, I don't know how to word this without, I just don't know how to say that.
Yeah, be careful.
I don't know, I ain't worried about you.
You're about to say something anti-Second Amendment in a very Second Amendment county.
I understand, I support, so I think everyone has a right to bear arms. But I think, actually, I don't think everyone does. I think if you have some serious mental issues, you don't need to bear arms. Now, I'll be honest with you.
You have a valid point.
If you have some serious mental issues, you don't need a weapon. And that's where I don't have a problem with the red flag, is that if you can give me a valid, like, show me this person has valid mental issues, then I don't believe they need to carry a weapon. And that is the only reason I don't think someone needs to carry a weapon.
I agree with you, but I don't think that making a law a lot of times is effective, and I don't think that a law here would be effective. I really don't think that a law is going to stop the crazy from getting a gun. But what it might do, the law might do, is stop a lot of legitimate U.S. citizens from having the right to protect themselves and defend themselves. When you say I believe in the right to bear arms, I don't ever put it that way anymore. I believe that you have the right to defend yourself. And when the government says that you can't have a gun, they're telling you you don't have the right to defend yourself with a gun. That's what they're really telling you. And whereas like I said, I don't really believe it'll be effective. I don't think that it's proven to be effective. I haven't done my research on this, so I'm not going to stab too far in the dark. But I will say that I bet if you do the research, there's been quite a few shooters, crazies that have done, I think the Sandy Hook guy for sure, lived in a state where he wasn't allowed to legally buy firearms. Yeah. So again, the law failed. And I mean, a law, it's just not going to work. He'll just find somewhere else to buy a gun, especially in a gun culture this deep. So in a gun culture this deep, that we're this far down the road of the right to bear arms, I would rather the government stay out of it and everybody still have the right to buy a firearm.
Like I said, I feel there are individuals that I don't believe need to carry a weapon.
Well, like Ben Franklin said, he said, liberty necessitates the fact that some evil be allowed to exist. Some evil has to be allowed to exist or you lose all freedoms. That's the core premise of every totalitarian state in the world, trying to do everything they can to nerf the world or wrap everybody in bubble wrap and make everybody happy. And you can't do that. It necessitates that some evil must exist, the same way with COVID. I'm a tell me, I believe in what the doctors tell me, but I do not believe that the government has the right to lay down edicts and to tell people. I believe the government has the responsibility to inform the public, to use its power, to get the right doctors together, to tell everybody the right things to do and what they believe they should do. But at the end of the day, it's a world of personal responsibility, a land of personal responsibility, where we should do the right things, and if we don't, the public hold you to account or hold you to responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. Same with guns.
That right there is the one aspect that I think you and I would butt heads on. Because I do feel strongly about that.
I feel strongly that something needs to be done. I just don't think it's government that needs to do it.
Well, who's going to do it then?
People. I mean, people are just government anyway. So, Walmart's done it, for instance. Walmart stopped selling AR-15s because they didn't think that the sale of AR-15s represented them. While I don't personally agree with that, I love my AR-15, that's their store and their right to do so. Dunham's has done something similar with some of theirs, and the other stores have done the same thing. But still, in the state of Tennessee, the state laws being what they are, still we can trade firearms amongst ourselves. And hopefully, you're not a big enough dummy to where, if you posted on a website that you were going to sell your AR-15 and the guy came and he was, twitching and mumbling and talking about doing something horrible, hopefully you wouldn't sell him the firearm. And I understand that's not always the case. A lot of times it's innocuous and you can't tell when a person has a mental health defect. But my point going back to it is all this government intervention did not stop it, will not stop it. At any given moment, a crazy can drive from, New York, which has the strictest gun laws in the world, one state down to Pennsylvania or West Virginia and probably buy a rocket launcher if they put their minds to it. The law didn't stop anything. That's not the way. I don't know all the answers, but I know the law didn't work.
All right, let's get to the last candidate we had on our list this morning before we run out of time. That's Christopher Hale.
Did we do Haggerty already?
Have we done? No, we haven't done Haggerty. We skipped Haggerty.
Hale's a Democrat. He's not going anywhere.
You can't say that. He's got a shot just like everybody else.
No, he doesn't. Desjardins is hugely popular
I agree.
in a very red state. I mean, regardless of what Mr. Hale believes or doesn't believe, I don't think he has a chance, and neither do you, I bet.
He's on the ballot.
He is on the ballot because
So
he's
he's got a
part of
shot.
the duopoly.
He's got a shot. Until as long as you're there, it's you get a pitcher in the bottom of the ninth, go up to the plate. He's still got a chance to hit a home run, even though there's not much of a chance.
I'm going to quote Newsroom again. If liberals are so freaking smart, why do they lose so freaking always? I just think with our last 6 minutes here, we should focus on who's going to actually represent us, which will probably be Haggerty.
Yeah, that's true. Let's go with Haggerty.
And I'm not that familiar with Mr. Haggerty, but I know he ran a pretty tight race against Dr. Manny and pulled it off.
I was surprised that Haggerty won more of the rural counties and not as many as the larger cities.
I really think those big signs that say endorsed by Trump probably helped him a lot.
I will agree with that.
I mean, when the President of the United States, regardless of how you feel about him, supports you directly and literally says your name on your campaign ad, it's a pretty big trophy. I mean,
Which is also why we think he'll win in November.
yeah, I think he'll win by a large margin. But looking back across his career, I did find some things interesting. I found it interesting that he worked for the Mitt Romney campaign and the Trump campaign, being that there's so much enmity now between Romney and Trump. Now, I have a feeling I know what Mr. Haggerty would say. Now, this isn't a quote. This is just what I feel he would say if he was pressed on that. He would probably say, well, at that time, Mr. Romney represented conservative core values, but now he doesn't, blah, 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 and that's why I'm moving on in a different direction. But to me, it just shows that a man, like all the other ones that get to that level, that had great political aspirations and was willing to do, say, or be whatever he needed to be to get to where he got. And that's Haggerty 101.
He was also part of Trump's transition team.
Right. And the ambassador to Japan.
Yeah, for 3 years.
So I mean, he's a deep stater. He's got deep ties to Washington already.
It's a seat that's been vacated by Lamar Alexander, so there's not an incumbent running, which I don't know how a lot of people feel, but I think I like fresh blood when it comes to politics. I like having new people come into office.
I do too, but what you have to realize is it creates a power vacuum just like countries, and now somebody else will take over. So Lamar was in Senate for so long, he was considered a Senate leader. He he sat on the lead of a lot of committees and councils, and when a guy like Lamar leaves, although I don't agree with Lamar's politics at all, but what you really creates a power vacuum where you hand it over to the next guy. And that's what you really have to look at. You really have to look at, okay, who fills the void that Lamar leaves behind? Because a freshman senator is not going to be, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. It's just not going to happen. It'll be somebody else that's long tenured. So you have to look at who that might be. And a lot of times, believe it or not, when this happens, you end up with someone in control of certain committees and chairs that you may not politically agree with at all. It may, for instance, go to a Democrat. Might be the next in line that may not represent the values of Franklin County, or it may go to a Republican that may not represent the values of Franklin County.
I will say,
consequences.
like I said, for Haggerty, I will say that he's got a very deep background in economics. It's what he hung his hat on. It's what he got You know, he did for a profession for many, many years, was in the trading industry. Stocks and bonds, yeah, he did, you know, that's where his expertise comes, is in the economic side of it. So I think in this stretch right now, and, you know, we did have a great run there for a time with our economy starting to pick up and booming a little bit, and then COVID hit. I think we need people in there who have that mindset and have that mentality of how to help bring the economy back and know the numbers and know how to make the numbers, look at the numbers and see what they actually mean.
I agree with you that we do need people in who can do that, but I would disagree as the method and means by which they're doing that, which is what, you know, everybody keeps asking what government can do for me. It's like, you know, with these stimulus bills and everything like that, what we need is legislators that say no. You know as well as I do, the best mothers, the best fathers, the best parents are not the ones who say yes. In Franklin County, I guarantee you, you all know what I'm talking about, are not the ones that constantly say yes and give their kid this, that, or the others. They're the mothers and fathers who say no. And they make their kids work. They don't entitle their kids. Well, our government is just enabling us to be worthless, enabling us to be more socialist, enabling us to, you know, give them more and more power, more and more control over more and more things. We need, you know, Mr. Haggerty, what I would implore you to do when you get up there is start saying no. Stop saying no to extra spending. Stop saying no to, you know, the government nanny state. Because and conservatives and Democrats alike are guilty, every one of them. And then, you know what, you know, making you happy as the voter by telling you, I'll give you this, give you that, give you this, give you that. You know, as we established earlier with 30%, like half the time it's a lie. You know, I went and lobbied David Alexander over the gas tax issue, and I know I keep hitting him with this, and I'm going to keep hitting him with this because it really made me mad when he pulled me in his office and basically said, there's no way in heck that he votes for it. You know, and I go down there and use a lot of the numbers that he'd given me to ream Haslam's, you know, I gave him a good one at the town hall here in Franklin County, and even made the paper over my opposition that Haslam had no answer. But then after that meeting, it's actually called political hotboxing. Guys, when a big dog like Haslam, a billionaire, the governor, comes and takes a local, you know, small representative and takes him and puts him in a corner in a hot box and basically forces him on an issue. I believe that's what happened to David Alexander. He turned right around the next week and voted yes on the gas tax. You know, that happens so often where they and all I'm getting to is they say one thing and they do another, and we don't seem to pay attention. And then you know you don't pay attention to what happened after that. Like for instance, you know, Franklin County wasn't happy about, you know, David voting for that, but he turned around and won the county mayor's spot. He just voted to raise taxes in Tennessee, a state that didn't need the gas tax, and we all opposed it. And then you turn around and you elect him as your county mayor? What sense does that make? It only makes the sense of the duopoly. You're either red or you're blue. It's got to be a zero-sum game, one side or the other. But I believe, Ricky, that wraps us up. It is 9 o'clock. It's time for me to go do a job that pays bills.
All right, folks, you've been listening to Liberty is Treason here on WCT. Thanks for tuning in. Catch us the second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 8 o'clock.